All right, Rabosai, let's finish up the Nemuke Yosef. Okay, we are it's on Daf Chesamud Beis in the Dape Harif, and it's two lines from the bottom on Chesamud Beis, page 16. We're going to finish it up and then jump to the Mordechai, which, as I mentioned last time, is a very important Mordechai, which has tremendous halacha l'maisa for today, for nowadays. So again, the Nemuke Yosef is on the bottom of Chesamud Beis. Okay, and again, the question of whether the issue is whether because you prevented me from making money. The one case that the Gemara didn't talk about, the case where the Gemara did not talk about, is a gaver delo ovid lemegar. The guy is a lo nene, but the other guy is a chaser. Okay, and we have to decide. And there was a big machlokas whether since the chaser is a grama. So you're putter, or no? But the grama, you at the end of the day, even though you weren't nene, but you have what he lost in you, and therefore you have to pay. And there was a big machlokas rishonim. Okay, so again, whether a lo nene v'zeh chaser, whether you have to pay or not. Okay, so now let's go to the second to the last line. My havi Allah lamaisa. What do we do? Halacha lamaisa.
Which daf again?
It's page 16, second to the last line, Nemuke Yosef, Daf Chesamud Beis. In the old fashioned.
Rabbi, I have a different source of daf. What's the Dibra Moscow that we're in? Or some sort of a break?
It's right after Man de Doin Dana de Garmi Ad Kan, and then it says My Havi Allah.
Well, do you mean in the Rif?
No, in the Nemuke Yosef.
No, but I'm saying Josh trying to find the place.
Oh, it's in the Dape Harif. Okay. What have you got there, Josh? Tell me what you got.
I've got a Ozvahadar completely changed everything around over here.
But do you remember where we left off last time? Do you have marked off where we left last time?
I was in the car last time. That was my problem.
I see. Oh boy. All right. Wow. It's a huge piece. And I'm not even sure there's a good Dibur Amatchil for you.
Right. This is labeled Kaf Amud Aleph, Kaf Amud Beis.
It's going to be labeled Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph.
Okay, so this big one over here.
Oh,
okay.
I see. No. It's Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. It's Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. It's in the section of Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, which starts Omer Le Rav Chisda L'Rami Bar Chama. That's Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. You got that? In the Nemuke Yosef, there's a Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, Omer Le Rav Chisda L'Rami Bar Chama.
Yeah, they completely messed stuff up for you.
That's where the whole thing starts. Anyway, he quotes all the Gemara with all the Rashis, okay, and then he picks up with his own commentary on Chatzur de Kamila Agra v'Gavra Delo Ovid Lemegar.
Right, that might be a Dibra Matzil, because by us it's quasi.
Very possible. Where it says Lois Kiru, that's not mentioned in the Gemara. The Gemara does not mention a Chatzur de Kamila Agra v'Gavra Delo Ovid Lemegar, and Tosfot said that he's potter, Pasha that he's potter. But there were other Rishonim that say that he's going to be chayiv because even though it's a grama, he's mavatal kiso shel chavero, but at the end of the day, he's holding on to something. He got something from the guy, okay, and therefore it's a machlokus. But we want to go now to the part that says my havi Allah.
Okay, I got it.
Do you see above Abasa Yud Beis Amud Beis? Okay, my havi Allah. Kosav hara'ah afal gav tekaimelan ba'alma. Now we're tying in Kofid al Midas Dom, and what's the example? Right? Hani mili bekarka shel shnehem shein mishtamish bishalo. What he's doing is he's limiting the application of Kofid al Midas Dom so that it doesn't apply here. The l'chayra Kofid al Midas Dom should apply here, and he certainly should not have to pay any rent. But we only say kofin al midas dom, and here we're getting whether it's before the fact or after the fact. All right, we only say kofin al midas dom kishekarkish al shneim shein mishtamish bishalo kla, meaning you're not using your part. We both have rights here, but you're not using your rights. All right, elashiyachal lachufo mibidas hadin shelo lasoso. He's going to give the example. Kigon habona keneged chalono shel chavero. All right, so I've got a window which gives me daylight, and you want to build a wall that's going to block my light. I have a right to stop you. I have a right to stop you. You can't build a wall to block my light. However, all right, so mitzad din hala ma'akev alav shelo listom ora shelo. But hala rotze lasot lo chalonas b'mokam acher. I'll say, wait a minute. What's your problem? Your problem is that my wall is going to block your light. I will pay to block. You let me build my wall. I'll block your light, and I'll open at my expense a window for you further down in your room, so you will have light. So the din is right. Chalon b'mokam acher shelo yafsid min haora klal kegon ze amrinan kofin alav lishtamish b'shel kofin. We force Shimon to allow Reuven to build the wall and then open up a window further down. Because at the end of the day, Shimon is getting exactly what he started out with, and he's not losing anything. That's Kofin al Midas Dom. Why don't we apply the same concept here? Since it's lo kaimer la'agra, you're not losing anything, so why can't I force you to let me in? Aval lehishtamish b'shelo klal lo amru. To use your thing, I can't force you to let me use your thing. I can force you to let me figure out how you're not going to lose anything because I'm not using your thing. But here, lishtamish b'shelo klal lo amru. And of course, we said this before. Shim it ata omer kain ein lecharim shelo yochov es chavero al korcho. Right? You guys don't use your house to rent. You guys don't rent your house. I'm going to force you to let me live there. Every guy, I'll force you to let me live there. Adkan v'chein das harosh zal. Is that for sure I can't force you to let me. Okay? Just a minute. I'm sorry. This is my sister-in-law. I've got it. Oh, my wife has the phone. Okay.
It's a politically correct thing in the liberal world.
Is that what?
That people can force themselves to live into other, in other people's places.
Wait, say that again?
Well, it's the politically correct thing in the liberal hashkafa. They know.
But I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm sorry. I apologize. There was pushing. My sister-in-law's trying to reach us about the flights. I'm sorry. Start again, please. I'm sorry. Start again.
People, left-wing liberals, anarchists that squat in other people's property against all right and rule, just claiming that. So what? That it's yours, and that's exactly what's written here.
Yeah. Well, so we don't bring a riot from people who treat everybody else's property as hefker. Okay, because they say that again. We're not going to bring it anyway. So clearly, I can't force you. That's ein lechadam. Ein lechadam shelo yochov es chavero al korcho ad kan v'chein das harosh zal the haritva zal the chai gab the lo amrin and kofin al midas dom. Kofin al midas dom doesn't mean that I get to force you to let me use your thing. Okay, and that's partially we've said that a number of times. Let's continue.
So this is lechatchila.
No, again, we're only talking after the fact. All right, after the fact, do you have to pay or not? But then we say that's a zenen of zelo chaser. But kofin al midas dom is likatchila, and for sure we don't apply kofin al midas dom for me to use your thing. Kofin al midas dom is only. We had another example where since you're going to end up with one piece of property or another piece of property, what difference does it make whether you get this piece of property or that piece of property? But I can't take something away from you that you have a right to.
Right. Well, what I meant by lechatchila, maybe I didn't use the word correctly, was before the fact or after the fact.
Exactly. And before the fact, I cannot force you. After the fact, we have a concept of zenan of izelochas. Okay. Amar of Kahana. Haki kaimelon de ein tzarich la'alot lo schar. And again, Rav God, that was all of the fact that the guy is also benefiting the person, but it's all with a low kaima la'agra. Ve'afilu b'chatzer de kaima la'agra v'gava da'avid lemegar dechule al machayev. But if it's a low kaima la'agra, then he doesn't have to pay. Kosav aramazal de'iyit barer kodem shedar zeba. The lo havi kapid by love liogra. All right, here's an interesting case. Okay, you normally have an Airbnb, but you took it off the market for the next 2 weeks. You took your Airbnb off the market. So what do we say? It's kaima la'agra, lo kaima la'agra. Says the Rama. Afal gav dimikame hachi havu kaima la'agra. Till now you were renting it, but if we can prove that for the next 2 weeks you had no intention to rent it at all, patur The basar hahu shaita de darba hai gavra azlina. The shaita zenena v'zena chasaru. Once you took it off the market, my living there didn't cost you anything, and therefore it turned into a zenena v'zelo chaser. Okay, that was again that's an interesting but important halacha.
Could we go over this one more time, please, Rabbi?
You have an Airbnb, but you took it off the market for the next 2 weeks. And I moved in. So that's a zenan of Vizelo Chaser because you took it off the market. But you realize it works in the opposite direction also. We compared that to a guy who says he never rents it, but I don't let you in. If you come in, you got to pay me $100 a night. So what I just did is, even though basically it's a lo kaima la'agra, I turned my house vis-a-vis you into a kaima la'agra. In other words, the whole reality depends very existentially. What is the situation of that house right now while you're living there? And I just, like, if I took it off the market, I turned it into a low kaima la'agra. If I tell you that if you move in, you got to pay me $100, I turned it into a kaima la'agra, even though I never rented.
Okay. If I tell you that you can't move in, meaning if I change my mind toch kedei or something like that.
No, there's no changing your mind toch kedei. I'm sorry. You get what do you mean change your mind toch? You can take.
No, I took it off the market. I took it off the market. Now I had a good reason why I took it off the market. I wanted to renovate it, or I wanted to give it to somebody in my family to use it myself. And now all of a sudden, Mr. Squatter comes and he can say,
you're creating situations that the basin has to don. We're talking in a case where you took it off the market and it's low kaima la'agra. It's going to sit empty for the next 2 weeks. Till now, you've been renting it, and now you took it. Obviously, if you took it off the market because you want to renovate it, that's not called low kaima la'agra. Okay, that's in the process of how you're going to rent it in the future. We're talking you took it off the market. Understand the scenario, Daniel. Try to understand the scenario that it makes sense. Okay, you're creating scenarios that don't make sense, and therefore the din is different.
So basically, this guy is going to have now like quasi a dead piece of real estate, and therefore it's going to be a zelene v'zelo chaser.
That's what it turned into. Again, the chiddush here. Look at the last few words. Hahi shaita zenene v'zeh chaser hu. It depends on what it is like that. But let's not get sidetracked. This was a very tricky case, but there's a very important halacha that comes out of the case that sounded very weird. Okay, Amar Rabba Barahuna, Hachi Amar Abba Mari Mishmei Derav. Hadar b'chatzer chaveru shalom idaito ein tzarich lalat lo schar. V'hasocher bayit mi Ruvain ma l'schar l'Shimon. You remember that Gemara? And the Gemara says, Shimon, where's Shimon coming in? Well, Shimon ma'avidete. What's Shimon doing there? Hachi Amar. Here's the scenario. Again, remember the Gemara and remember the Gemara's answer to the contradiction, but we're going to have a big diuk why the Gemara answered the way it did and didn't answer differently. Hachikamar, im nimtza bayit shel Shimon, meaning that Ruvain rented the house to Levi, but it turned out it wasn't Ruvain's, it was Shimon's. So Levi lived in the house thinking he's renting from Ruvain, but really it was shel Shimon. Remember the scenario. Im nimtza bayit shel Shimon. Wait a minute. Why is he paying Shimon? He's a darba chatzer chaveru shalom idaito. Because Shimon never agreed to rent it, and Shimon never knew about it. Again, remember the case. Reuven comes up to Levi and says, "Hey, I got a great apartment for you. Okay, and here it is. Right, $100 a night." And Levi moves in, and then it turns out that it's shel Levi. It's shel Shimon. So Shimon, as far as Shimon is concerned, Levi was dar shalom idaito. So why does he have to pay Shimon? Why does he have to pay Shimon if you hold that adar b'chatzer chaver shalom idaito ain't tzarich lalot lo schar? Answers the Gemara, right? What's the answer? Tarti lo kasha had the kaima la'agra had lo kaima la'agra. That when Levi moved into Shimon's house, thinking he's renting from Reuven, but he's really living in Shimon's house, and Shimon's house is a kaima la'agra, then he's going to have to pay, because he's not a dar b'chatzer chaveru shalom idaito in a low kaima la'agra. He's dar b'chatzer chaveru shalom idaito of Shimon with its kaima la'agra. Therefore, he has to pay rent. But if it really was a low kaima la'agra, then he doesn't have to pay rent. B'chein hasocher bayit mibnei ha'ir nimtzu lo bailim malaschar lo bailim. Right, and the Gemara says the same thing. That it depends whether the Bailim was a Kaima Lagra or a low Kaima Lagra. Ad Kan, the Gemara. Nimtza bayit shel Shimon, v'hu sachar leRuven, malaschar leRuven, tarti? Klomer, tarti mili, I'm just reading the Rashis now. Tarti mili disatrin adade, davadai sachar bayit beit Shimon miRuven, havele dar b'chatzar Shimon, shalom idaito. He rented it from Ruven, Shimon doesn't know anything about it. So you're living in Shimon's house, shalom idaito. Why do I have to pay him rent? I was dar b'chatzar chaver shalom idaito. And the answer is ha de kaimala agra. When Shimon's house is an Airbnb, then malas char l'Shimon. The having lezenenev is a chaser. Ha de lo kaimala agra ein tzarich lalot lo schar. But if it was a lo kaimala agra and Reuven said, "Hey, I got a great house to rent you," and Shimon and Levi agrees, "Oh, I'm going to rent for $100 a night." But listen carefully, because here we're going to make an important diuk lahalacha. So remember the case precisely. Reuven comes to Levi and says, you're looking for a house, Levi, right? You're a kaimel agra, right? I got a great house for you, $100 a night. And he shows him Shimon's house. So Levi moved into Shimon's house, which is a low kaimel agra. Remember, it's a kaimel agra he has to pay. It's a low kaimel agra, and what does it say? That when it turns out to have been Shimon's house, Levi doesn't have to pay any rent. Wait a minute. But Levi already agreed that he was ready to pay rent. That's the issue here. When Reuven said, I got a house for you, $100 a night, and Levi said, wonderful, I'm going to rent the house at $100 a night. And he moved into Shimon's house, which is a low kaimel agra. What does it say? Does Levi have to pay or not have to pay?
Does not.
He does not have to pay, even though he had already agreed that he would pay. He was ready to pay, right? But it turns out that he lived in a house that the guy has no rights to claim rent. This is going to be very halacha l'maisa now. Kosav arama. Demida kamishanin hachi. The Gemara gave a teretz kaimel agra, lo kaimel agra. The lo kamishanin, how the nachas adaita de agra, how the lo nachas adaita de agra. One could have said very simple. Did Reuven tell Shimon that Levi go into the house for free, or he told Levi to go into the house for rent? I could have easily said, when Reuven told Levi to go in the house for free, and he lived in Shimon's house, and it's lo kaimel agra, of course he doesn't have to pay rent. But if Reuven told Levi go into the house for $100 a night, then I could have answered, even though it's a lo kaimel agra, since Levi already agreed to pay rent, he's going to have to pay rent to Shimon. And the Gemara did not answer that. Shaminan de cholhecha de lo kaimel agra gabe bailim. Since the bailim was a lo kaimel agra by Shimon, when Levi moved in, he was planning on paying rent, but he moved into a house of Shimon that's lo kaimel agra, right? He was ready to pay Reuven rent. He was ready to pay Reuven $100 a night. Lo mechayev lo midi. He doesn't owe Shimon a penny. At the end of the day, towards Reuven, it was a mekach tos. Right? Reuven sold him the Brooklyn Bridge. So he had no chiyuv to Reuven. Even though he agreed to pay Reuven $100, he has no chiyuv to Reuven. It's a mekach tos. The lo mechayev lemesav le'midi. He has no responsibility to give Reuven a penny. Sharin isbar she'eno shalo. So he agreed to pay Reuven $100 a night when Reuven had no right, so he doesn't owe Reuven a penny. So legabe socher nami mekach tosu. So it's called the mekach tos to Shimon also, and the agreement to pay rent to Reuven was betos, so therefore the whole thing is betos.
No, the socher is Levi.
The socher is Levi, who was ready to pay rent to Reuven, which was a tos, so therefore it's considered a tos klape Shimon too, and therefore even though he's ready to pay rent to Reuven betos, which he doesn't owe, so he doesn't owe rent to Shimon either, since it's a lo kaimel agra, even though he was ready to pay rent, because that was a tos.
Why do we call this a
Let me just finish. Ukamandelo ogir dami. Kiva dechi ogar lav miman de isle schusa begave ogar. He rented from somebody who had no right, who he didn't have to pay rent to. So therefore, he's considered a lo kaimel agra. And lo mishtabed mikoach hai schirus lechad minayu. So he doesn't become liable to either of them. He's not liable to Reuven because Reuven has no rights. And he's not liable to Shimon because he never agreed to pay Shimon. And therefore, if it's a lo kaima la'agra, he doesn't have to pay anybody anything. And the Ramah proves that because the Gemara could have had a simple teretz to justify when does he have to pay Shimon and when does he not have to pay Shimon. He could have had to pay Shimon when he agreed to pay Reuven, and he doesn't have to pay Shimon when he never agreed to pay Reuven. So therefore, it's a proof that even though he agreed to pay Reuven, he doesn't have to pay Shimon anything. Till there, is there a question? Because there's one more step coming.
I just wonder, why do the Rishonim call it a tov if it's really a tarmit?
That's what his agreement. When I agreed to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge and you agreed to buy it, and we make a kinyan, that's called a tos. Your kinyan is the tos.
No, that's called tipshus. That's called.
Daniel, let's not get into the linguistics of it. It's considered halachically, it's considered a mistake. It's a mekach tos. It's called, that's the category. When I sell you something that I don't own and you agree to buy what I don't own, it's called a mekach tos. Let's not get into the semantics of it, okay?
Yeah, but obviously this guy is obviously doing it.
Daniel, I'm not gonna give Reuven Shlishi, and I'm not gonna do any business with him. He's a crook. But the question is, what did Levi commit to? He committed to pay rent betos. That's all. That's called, he committed to pay rent betos. That's why he doesn't have to pay Shimon either. However, wait, but we're not finished.
I just don't think that that's so simple.
Again, what? You think he has to pay?
B'diavad, I think he owes Shimon money, yeah.
On what basis?
Because he lived in Shimon's place, even though Shimon's place is not
Shalomi dai, except lo kaimala. Again, but don't ignore the pieces. It's a lo kaimala. It's a lo kaimala akra, and he lived there shalomi das Shimon. That's the end of the story. The fact that his agreement with Reuven, that's exactly his agreement with Reuven was a ta'us.
Yeah, but he was nene from Shimon.
And Shimon was lo chaser. So we're back to our din of zen nenev is lo chaser. But don't make it what it isn't. It's a zen nenev is lo chaser. However, im nasan lo schar. What happens if he had already paid Reuven the rent? He paid Reuven the rent. Even shu boror de b'ta'us yoiv le chayiv lahachziro. Reuven has to give back the money. The mechila b'ta'us kahai gavna lo havi mechila midi de havi akinyan b'ta'us. It's a kinyan b'ta'us. The question is okay. Basically, the rest I'm going to skip the rest because it gets into all other kinds of cases. But just skip down for a few minutes after down to the Ritva Zal. Hainu b'chatzor de l'kaima la'agra. Aval b'chatzor de kaima la'agra. Upara kvar haskar leruven. What again? Now, Daniel, you'll be a little happier. I'm skipping some lines, and I'll just read it outside if you don't see where I'm picking it up. It's right after the Ritva Zal. Hainu b'chatzor de lokaim. It's about 2-4. It's about 8 lines down.
I see.
What happens if? Here's the story. We talked about Shimon's house being lokaim la'agra. What happens if Shimon's house was an Airbnb? And Reuven said, "I'll rent you a house for $100 a night," and he agreed. And he moved into Shimon's house. And he paid the rent to Reuven.
So Reuven
What's supposed to happen?
Reuven,
He's a ganef.
He's a ganef.
Absolutely. Does Shimon have a right to collect rent from Levi?
Well, it's a kaima la'agra.
Yeah, that's
Listen carefully to the case. Shimon has an Airbnb kind of la'ag. Reuven comes to Levi and says, "I got a great place for you, $100 a night." And Reuven says, and Shimon says, and Levi says, "I'll take it." And he pays $100 a night to Reuven. And then Shimon finds out what happened. Who's Shimon's litigation with? Reuven or Levi?
Reuven. He has them. He's holding the money, and he
has no relationship.
He had no right to take the money from Levi for his property.
Does Shimon have to start up with Reuven, or
Shimon owes him the money?
Shimon goes to Levi and says, "Excuse me, you lived in my house, shalomi daiti, and it's kaima la'agra. Please pay me rent." And Shimon says, and Levi says, "Oh, but I already paid to Reuven." So what's Shimon's response to that?
That was a mechak tos, and you owe me money.
And go run after Reuven. I'm not running after Reuven.
Right.
I
That
don't know
wasn't my
Reuven. I don't
problem.
know anything. You lived in my house. It's Kaima Agra. Pay me rent. And the fact that Levi paid Reuven, that's not Shimon's problem. That's what it says here. Okay?
Crazy.
That's what it says. Hainu b'chatzar de lo Kaima Agra, but b'chatzar de Kaima Agra upora kvar aschar le Reuven, chozer uporei ala Shimon. He's got to pay again till Shimon. And then chozer hu ala Gazlan. And then he has to go and argue with the Gazlan to get his money back. Dumi de lokech sara mechaver v'nimtza sheinu shelo. Shechai v'lokech lahachzer sara lo peiros levaylin. It's an explicit Gemara, but I bought a field from you. Okay, I bought a field. I paid you money, and I worked the field. All right, and I was there for 6 months, and I got lots of payros from the field. And then it turns out that the field that I bought from you belonged to Doug Backer. And Doug Backer comes and says, Karlinsky, what are you doing in my field? I say, I bought the field. I bought the field from Dan Ritz. He's a gossip. He's a thief. Your problem. You take away the field from me with all the payros. I have to give you back the field. I have to give you back the payros. And my problem is I got to now go run after Dan Ritz to get my money back. But you have nothing to do with Dan Ritz. And the same thing here is that if Reuven rents it to Levi and gets money from Levi, and it's a chatzar to Kaima La'agra, Levi owes Shimon rent, and it's Levi's problem to get his money back from Reuven. Okay, that should be clear that's the halacha. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's enough for the Nuke Yosef. There's a lot more we could do, but we want to go now to the sheet that I gave you. I want to just see the Mordechai. Okay, because this Mordechai updates everything that we've been talking about. Okay, again, right now the way we understand it is that if I pitch my my sleeping bag on your back porch, and you never rent your house, you never rent your porch. I could have gone to a campground and I could have paid $25 a night because that's a kaimala. I'm a manda ogir. I rent, and you know what? I figured I'll save the $25 because you're on vacation. I'll put my sleeping bag and my tent on your porch, and it's a lo kaimala agra. So lechayra, we should say I'm potter. Says the Mordechai. Everybody sees on the sheet that I sent you. All right, it's on this Gemara. It's Ot Tet Zayin in the Mordechai. I'll give you guys a chance to get it up. Okay? Very important Mordechai. This is even before we see the Rambam and the tour.
This is the sheet Mordechai Baba Bakama Ot Tetzain.
Exactly.
All right.
All right, just another. Everybody have it?
Are we going back to the Are we going back to the riff one more time, or are we done with the riff?
We're done with the riff. No, you can put the Gemara away. We're not using the Gemara anymore. Okay. Meaning, what did we say? That even though a guy normally rents, if the chatzar is lo kaima la'agra, doesn't have to pay rent. My taima zenen v'zeno chaser. The chaser afilu purta. Remember what we said about the new house. Kishachri rusa the ishta. O b'shum davar. If there's any loss whatsoever, then tzarich sheyitin lo schar. Afal pi she'ola lo yoter mechisrona. Pirush ri. So this is an interesting question. Okay, so if it's a zenen of a zelo chaser because you're a lo kamela agra, but I caused you a little bit of loss. You know, when I lived there was a $10 loss. Rent is $100 a night, and I caused you a $10 loss. Again, we're in a low kamela agra. Please remember, we're in a low kamela agra. So there's really no market value on a low kamela agra. The loss I caused you was $10. So I can't activate any more zenen of a zelo chaser because you're chaser. How much do I have to pay you? Do I have to pay you the chaser or do I have to pay you my hana'ah? Because my hana'ah was I saved $100 a night from the hotel. Your cheser was $10. So the Re says, once there's cheser, then Ma'ali, you have to pay the full rent. I have to pay the amount of money that I was nene. Okay? Ve'im tomar ma'ishna mi perik elu nairos gabi tochav lo chavero toch beis abliya chayev ha'ochel afal pishim haya machzir haya nimas v'lo haya shava klum. We had this in the Tosfos. All right, okay. So why do I have to pay more? In other words, if I had hana'ah from your loss, you're going to lose anyway, but you lost. and you didn't lose because of me, but you lost, then I have to pay for my hana. I have to pay for the hana because there was a loss. Okay? And okay. That's basically. Now, that's the we saw that in the read. That was basically the Tosos that we learned. But now says the Mordechai, had patrina na darba chatzer chaver shalomi daito dafka hecha de lo goli adaite de nichale be'ahu ana ela bechinam. It's only when the guy who is a kaimala, the guy who is a avid lemegar, and he's living in a house that is lo kaimala agra. When do we say you're pater? When you never indicated that you were ready to pay. In other words, you would have rented, you would have had to go to a hotel, but hey, this is free. I'm living here for free. But if I have to pay, I'm never doing it. What happens if I would like it to be for free, but you know what? I'm ready to pay. If I have to pay, I'll pay. But it's free. So if we can prove that you would have paid, even though it was lo kaima la'agra, you would have paid. If the guy would have stood there and said, "Excuse me, I'm not letting you in unless you pay," you would have paid. Then you're going to have to pay anyway. Okay. Pirish read the my timer zenen v'zeinu chaser chaser Rabbeinu Avi Ezri shamati dematzi lemechavye da kofin al miras dom v'yesh meforshim ein kofin el kugon hechad demahani. Here we get into the machlokas about whether there's a kofin here or not. Arna feel he boy larvuche bahamilsa lo matzi larvuche ilka kaifinale kiven de lo chaser midi. Aval hechad I havi boi baal hachatzer li igure havi mirvach hashta nami kilo mugir le. Okay, so we have another thing. We have the idea that you normally don't rent. But could you have rented it? You have a house, you never rent. But if you would go away for Pesach, would there be people who could rent your house and you could rent the house? You never rented it and you would never rent it and you're not going to let people in. But you could. Says the Mordechai, that turns it into a kaima la'agra. That turns it into a kaima la'agra. Because you could rent it.
But that's the case of all these cases that every single case we've had this whole topic.
Hashtanami ki lo mogirle, lo kaifile, came pirish read the ein kofin lahaba, achim ovar venena ein tzarch la lo schar. The ichatzer, just hold on for a minute. The ichatzer de kaima la agra tzarch la lo schar afilu begaver de lo avid lemega. The offset ke de gamali fk yotzer. V'chein pirish ha'alfus, the lo kiri, aval b'yesod Rabbeinu Peretz matzati, the pshita de potter, kaven de lo nene. The mifsido ein ze ela grama be'alma midi de havi aharbitz ari lifnei behemes chavera de potter, chen pirish read, de afilu in tokab chavera ve'otzia be'al korcha. Again, we get into the machlokas whether after the fact, if it is, again, we're in the case of ze nene, we're in the case of ze lo nene v'ze chaser. And then we have that machlokas whether you have to pay or not. But here's what we want from the Mordechai. Basically, everything we just saw now, we've seen in all the Rishonim back and forth. But here's the Mordechai has a big chiddush. Pirish Ravon, dechol habatim bizman hazeh kaima la'agra. Every house nowadays has a status of kaima la'agra. The afagav delo iskiru me'olam, even though he never rented it, it has a status of kaima la'agra because people could rent it. Umayse bihudi echad shebarach me'iro, v'loka chasar et beito, v'ishilo liyehudi acher. A guy ran away because of the government, and the king took over the house and rented it to a Jew. V'oso shebarach shalo aschirus. And then the Jew comes back afterwards, finally he's able to get back his house, and he wants rent from the Jew who lived there. So again, the Jew who ran away left the house, the king rented it to Shimon. Shimon lived there, and now Reuven, the owner, comes back. He wants Shimon to pay rent. Upotzak Rav Shmuel shelo yiten lo, dahai beisa lo kaima la'agra, sheim yotza Yehudi min abayit hasar yashilenu le'ovei kochavim v'nimtza zenene v'zeno chaser. Since he could have rented it to a non-Jew, it's really a lo chaser anything, and therefore he doesn't have to pay rent. But in our normal case, that line is a very important line. The Ravon says, nowadays there's no such thing, says the Ravon already in his day. There's no such thing as lo kaima la'agra. What it says is that if you pitch your tent in my backyard, I can charge you rent.
So-
I'm hearing
so-
silence.
So,
Yeah.
so is that saying that this whole discussion we've been having about a person who doesn't rent out his house is Lola Agra. He doesn't do it. This whole discussion has only been in a very, very small case, like the government, like the king.
No. It was
Rambam's
in a society. It was in a society that people didn't rent their houses. Renting a house was an unusual thing. Okay,
Mhm.
and today, right? Anybody who's wait, Dan, you live in Israel, right?
We use Airbnbs all the time, right?
Yeah, no, but you have neighbors who are going away for Pesach.
Right.
Okay, I have my son's trying to rent an apartment in Ramot, and he can't rent now because nobody wants to rent now. He's got to wait till after Pesach because everybody who has a house for rent, they're saying, why should I rent it now to you for a year and get 5,000 shekels a month? I'll wait till Pesach and I'll get 20,000 shekel for a week. Okay, so since everybody could do it and people do it, every house now has a din of kaima la'agra, even if you never rented. And when you go on vacation, you don't rent. You would never rent. You go to America, you won't rent your house. You don't want people in your house. But it has a status of kaima la'agra because people today rent their houses, apparently in a way different than what it was in the time of the Gemara.
Is there like daita? Is there like batla daita? It's kol adam.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. What we do is we impute to every house a status of kaima la'agra, means it could be rented.
Even
I
if
actually
you
encountered this in work in a real world situation. It was not somebody renting it out for somebody else, but the house gets damaged. There's the physical damage is covered, but then it was a second house. It was, call it a country cabin that they would use every weekend. So they lost use of it. So I was trying to establish that it has, the language in insurance is it has a fair rental value. A fair rental value, and they are entitled to get reimbursed for that. I lost the argument because it was never actually offered for rent. But it doesn't have to be currently rented. Let's say sometimes it's available for rent, but it's not rented. There, in that case, it clearly has a fair rental value that they could get reimbursed on insurance for.
Well, I don't understand. So why'd you lose?
I feel like I was right, but they're not all Talmudic like me or us. But because it was never actually ever offered for rent. It was their second home, whatever, their weekend.
So again,
Bungalow.
I think that in the time of the Gemara, you would lose. But according to the Ravon, you would win.
Well, that was why I brought it up now, that there is this concept of a fair rental value.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, let's get to the Rambam. Let's get to the Rambam, and then we'll open up the tour. I don't have my Ram. Oh, I have my Ram. I have a Rambam here. I don't have the Ram. I have the page. No, I don't. No, I don't. I have to get my Rambam. The Rambam is Hilchos Gezela, Paragimel Hilchos Gezela. It's going to be a very short Rambam, but that'll be the springboard for the tour. There's an interesting omission in the Rambam that the Rishonim jump on. So it's Gzela. Okay, Gzela it's in Mishpatim. I'm sorry, it's in Ezekiel. Gzela halacha tes. Gzela is in Ezekiel. All right, Gzela Aveda. Hilchos Gzela Aveda Paragimel. Okay, it's in Ezekiel. So halacha tes says, I'll give everybody a chance to find it. Okay, again, Hilchos Gezela, which is in Ezekiel, Perek Gimel Halacha Tes, Hadar v'Chatzer Chaveiro, Shalom Idaito. Here's our case. Im Osa Chatzer Eino Asuya Lischar, Eino Tzarech Lahalot Lo Schar. That's our din. Okay, Hadar v'Chatzer Chaveiro, Shalom Idaito. If it's not a normally rented property, you don't have to pay rent. Afal pi shederech ze hadar liskor mokom leatzmo, meaning the person normally pays rent. Okay, shezenena v'zeino chaser. That's so far exactly how we understand everything. V'im hachotzer asuya lischar, afal pi she'ein derech ze liskor, tzorich la'alot lo schar sharei chisro mamo. So he just took sides in the question of ze lo nene v'ze chaser, says the Rambam, without any no caveats. You know, you don't have to cause him any loss in the house or anything. You have to pay because you were that even though you weren't nene, he was chaser. And again, and we can add in the fact that at the end of the day, why isn't it just grama? You can't call it grama because at the end of the day, you had something of his chesed. You had something from his chesed.
What parak and halacha?
It's Perek Gimel halacha tes. Perek Gimel halacha tes. Okay. And we'll see just the Magid Mishnah. Okay, the Magid Mishnah says.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
you just go one more time to Seifa. How do you define this? Im hachotzer also liskor.
That's a avid la'oger. The norm. It's a normal chutzner that you rent, and the guy is not a renter.
But he's not a person that rents out his stuff.
So that's a ze lo nene.
So he's not nene. What's the he's not nene?
He didn't save any money because he never would pay money to rent.
You're talking about the occupant.
He has lots of options. He has free options. It's a ze lo nene. He has free options.
The maskir kivyachol, the owner is not the nene.
Daniel.
I'm not sure who is who.
The maskir is always the cheser. The maskir is always losing rent. The guy living there is either a nene or a lo nene.
Right. So who is the ze? Ze is the squatter.
The squatter is a lo nene. Why is he a lo nene?
Because the other guy is not chaser.
Wrong. Why are you talking about the other guy? I'm talking about the guy. Your hana doesn't depend on the other guy. Your hana depends on you. Do you normally pay rent? Did you save rent or you didn't save rent?
No, I didn't. I didn't save rent because I never pay rent.
That's it. So you're a lo nene.
I'm another nene.
You're a lo nene. And now I got to shift to the other guy. Well, was the other guy cheser?
Yes.
So that's a lo nene v'zeh chaser. That was the whole machlokas between Tosas and all the other Rishonim. Because at the end of the day, I'm a lo nene.
It's a bit of a difficult.
Which side is difficult for you? We've been talking about
the definition of the lo nene that I could just say, like by me defining myself as a person that doesn't pay ever rent.
Not defining yourself. Are you a person that had many free options? You have to prove that you are a person who has free options. Obviously, you have to prove that you're a lo nene. You can't just say I'm a lo nene.
Okay. Now I got it. Okay.
That's been our whole discussion. It's a gaver de lo ogir. A gaver de lo ogir. Rashi said he has lots of options.
He could sleep under the bridge, and he's okay with sleeping.
If that's what you normally do, not you could. That's what you normally do.
Right.
Okay. Says the Magid Mishnah. V'im chatzar asui l'schar afal pi she'ein derech zeh. Hu kedivrei halacha shekasav harav alfas the chatzar de kaima la'agra the gaver de lo ovid lemegar, which again Tosa said explicitly your potter shehu chayev b'schirus lefi shemida zu lo nizker b'gemora. That was the one case the Gemara didn't talk about, which is why we can have a machlokus. Aval de'at atosvos shehu potter umikol makom kosvu hameforshim de'im chaser habayit b'kol shehu kegon shahaya chadash v'hishchir hakosolim v'chasro me'erko afal pishi chaser she'eno asui l'skar kiven shu mechaser k'tzas megalgalan alavas hakol v'hechin muchach b'gemora, that even if you were if you're a lo nene and you cause damage, then you got to definitely pay rent. Okay. And then let's just.
And he's saying that he has to. He says megalgalin es hakol,
meaning rent. Megalgalin es hakol means rent.
Right, not just to repair the damage.
Exactly. Again, that is a machlokas also. Whether because remember, if you're a guy who had no hana'ah but you caused damage, so then you were a lo nene, but he was a chaser, but he's chaser not begrama. See, the only reason Tosfos could say that when you are lo nene and he's a kaimela agra that you could be potter is because your whole cheser was begrama. But the minute you cause them expenses, then you're not a grama anymore. then you're not a groma anymore. Okay, and therefore, even if you would hold normally that a loan zelonen of a chaser from rent, but if you actually cause damage, then that's a different chaser. It's not groma.
Wait, so what's the difference between that and the case where you throw the rock through somebody's window? You said last week that was a groma.
No, if you throw a rock through somebody's window, you're chayiv mazik.
Yeah, but you said it was a chiddush that you're chayiv nazik.
But once I have the once I have the chiddush, you got to pay. The chiddush here is when I throw a rock through the window, how much do I have to pay? $100 to fix the window. So if I would have only applied that here when I lived in the house and I caused you $10 worth of damage when I lived in the house, I should only have to pay you $10. Okay? But here it says that no, that once you can't activate anymore the zenene v'zel lo chaser if there's any chaser whatsoever. Because even if you paskin zenene v'zel lo chaser potter, but the minute there's a little chaser, you got to pay all the rent. That's the chiddush here. Okay, the little damage activates the entire rent. Okay, all right. Let's now have a quick look at the tour. Okay, at the tour. Where's my tour? The tour starts in Shin Samach Gimel, and this is what we're going to be involved in now for a while. Next time. So we're going to see the tour, Beis Yosef, and then we'll go to the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so it's Shin Samach Gimel. Where are we here? Start Shin Samach Gimel. Where am I here? Shin Samach Gimel. Right. You'll notice, by the way, that this is in Hilchos Gzela, not in Hilchos Chivus. Okay, both the Rambam and the Tur put it in Hilchos Gzela. Okay, so where do we pick it up? We pick it up in it's Vav. Okay, it's Shin Samach Gimel Vav, and it's Vav in both versions. In the new one, it's page Kufay and Daled, but whatever tour you have, it's going to be Shin Samach Gimel Sif Vav. Okay, everybody got it? So Hadar b'chotzer chaveru shalom midaito. Pirush shera'u darbo v'lo omar lo klum. Oh, so he's already adding something here. Ruvain moved into Shimon's house. That's a lo kaima la agra, and Shimon didn't say a word. She'im omar lo tzei v'lo yotza v'alei chayav litin lo kol scharo. If Shimon says, get out of my house, and you don't get out of your house, then for sure you got to pay rent. Because we only can talk about this when he's dar v'chatzer chavero shelo midaito. But the minute he's got the opposite of daito, he says, get out of my house, of course you have to pay rent. Ela lo omar le dover v'zed darbo. Meaning, now it's interesting, you want to be medayik here. That means even if Shimon saw him living there and he didn't say anything, that's called Shalom Midaito. He's calling that Shalom Midaito. You realize he's calling that Shalom Midaito because he's making him potter. Upirish ri shima darbo lo hayat tzarich liskor beinyan she'eno nene potter afilu imachotzer omed lahaskir. So he's paskening. He's bringing the ri, okay, that holds not like Tosfos. He's bringing the ri that if the guy is a lo nene. Okay, but the chutzner is omed lahaskir. Okay, potter. I'm sorry, this is the Tosfos. It's not it's the Tosfos. Eino net potter afilu ma chutzner omed lahaskir because he's lo nene. The Rav Alfus kasav omed chutzner lahaskir tzarich liten lo schar afilu madar lo hayat tzarich liskor. Ulezeh adoni avi haroshal. So we have the machlokas between the Rif Rosh on the one hand, that Azel lo nen of Azeh chaser has to pay rent, and the Tosfos and the Riu says he doesn't have to pay rent. The Harama Hosif Lomar, the Afilu lo hoyod darbo, kivan sha'omed lahaskir, the Gozlo mimenu, chayev. You got to pay rent, right? Afilu lo haya darbo, meaning Shimon never would have lived there. But Reuven moved in. Since Shimon could have rented it, he could have rented it. This is basically reminiscent of the Ravon in the Mordechai. Since Shimon could have rented it, and nowadays, could you rent your house? You could rent your house. So the minute you could rent your house, that turns it into a kind of agra, and you're chayev. Because at the end of the day, it's lo kaim agra. We'll see the Beis Yosef yet. Okay? V'imena chatzar omed lahaskir. What about if it's an ein omed lahaskir? So now we have a zen nene v'zel lo chaser. Ein tzarich latet lo klum, afilu shahaya zeh hadarbo tzarich liskor. Meaning, Reuven would have had to rent. If Reuven wouldn't have had Shimon's free house, he would have had to go to a hotel. So he's a nene. But Shimon never rents the house. So he's a lo chaser. Kivin shelo chasro klum. Lefikach, so now we're in the case of zen nene v'zel lo chaser. Potter. Therefore, im chesro afilu davar muat, kigon shahayar habayit chadash v'zeh chaser b'meh sheishchiro. That was the case of the guy who the top floor guy built the bottom house and he lived in it brand new. Okay, and there was an opinion that he has to pay rent. There was an opinion because he caused a brand new house. But if it would be no damage whatsoever, none whatsoever, he doesn't have to pay. But if there's any damage, even the slightest damage, he has to pay. He doesn't just have to make up the damage, but once there, in other words, the idea is the only way you get off the hook from paying rent when you are a nana and he's a lo chaser is that if he's a lo chaser, the minute he's a chaser, anything, then the fact that you are nana, you have to pay your hana. You have to pay whatever you were nana.
According to everybody, if he's a nene, but lo nene, then that's the machlokas.
Yes, there's a machlokas when there's lo nene v'zeh chaser. But in the zen nene v'zeh lo chaser, we paskin potter. We paskin zen nene v'zeh lo chaser potter because he didn't cost you anything. Therefore, but that only applies when there's a pure lo chaser. The minute there's a little chaser, you got to pay for your hana'ah, not just for the chaser. Okay. The dafka shalogi. Now, how he has another point, and this goes back to the case where Reuven rented Shimon, Reuven rented Levi the Brooklyn Bridge. The dafka shalogila hadar bedaito shehaya retzono lite lo schar. That's only when the zen nene vizel lo chaser. He never indicated that he was ready to pay rent. He moved in, it's free. Hey, it's free. Okay. Im lo henichu ladur bo bechina. If for some reason Shimon would have stopped him, says, "I'm sorry, I don't let you into my house," and I would have said, "Okay, I'll pay you," if we can know that he would have done that, so he's saying like this, that this whole din of zen nene v'zel lo chaser, that Reuven is potter from paying Shimon rent, it's only if we assumed, because we have no evidence differently, is that Reuven would have had to go to a hotel. But he didn't. He's nene. He saved the money of the hotel. And he lived in Shimon's house because it's free. Then you don't have to pay. But the minute Reuven indicated, I'd like to live in your house. I don't want to go to a hotel. Okay. But if I have to pay rent, I'll pay rent. Then even if it was a low kaima la'agra, but he indicated that he's only moving in because it's free. But if it's not free, I'll move in and pay. He's going to have to pay. That's a big chiddush already. Okay. And that came from that could have come from the issue of the Reuven and Shimon and Levi case. All right, we'll stop here. We're going to pick this up next time with the Beis Yosef, and then we will go into the Shulchan Aruch and see halacha lamaisa. Okay, and everything now we've got all the machlokas, we got to get to the Shulchan Aruch and see how we paskin lamaisa. But let's finish first the tour Beis Yosef. Okay.
Thank you.
So Bezrat Hashem, we will have a shir on Wednesday. There will be shir Wednesday. Okay, kol tuv.